Hey, happy Thursday, everybody. Appreciate everybody joining us today. By way of background, my name is Chase Eiserman. I recently just retired from the Air Force, a career contracting guy for 20 years, and joined up with the Outpost team to continue to expand their capabilities on the great work that they do to support our small business and those relationships. Most importantly, for today's conversation, the last 6 months of my career, I spent running the STRATFI TACFI program within AFWERX. So this topic is really near and dear to my heart, and it's timely in the fact that we are anticipating the notification to come out for the notice of opportunity in may possibly next week. May shift a little bit to the right, and then a quick turnaround of about 6 weeks to submission. So I'll go through our slides here and talk about some of the requirements in order for a company to be eligible on their phase 2 to get in the program. I'm going to spend the majority of our time talking about signature authorities, building relationships, transition plans, and things like that that really set a submission aside from the peers that are coming in the cohort. If we can sell on those specific areas of interest for review through the program and submission evaluation, gives a leg up in terms of getting through the rigorous review process to selection. A couple of rules of engagement. We've got the Q&A section. I have it open live on my desktop here. Love to have this be more conversational than just me reading off a PowerPoint and dictating. So if you have questions as we go through, please feel free to throw it in the Q&A. If it's pertinent to what we're talking about at the moment, I will go ahead and stop and answer the questions in real time so we can keep a good quality conversation. I want you to get the most out of it as possible. Throw the questions in there. Anything we don't get through the presentation, I'll go through the slides as quickly as appropriate so that we can get those questions answered towards the end and get more as we have a robust conversation. So getting into it. All right, so everybody's here with the Outpost. I appreciate, again, everybody signing up for the webinar and showing up so that we can have this very valuable and potentially company-changing, corporate-changing conversation. But just want to lay out where we are at Outpost and what we bring to the table. So with an 85% selection rate through the STRATFIs that we've supported over the past 3 years, we're batting a pretty high average. We've cracked the code on a lot of the language, dialogue, and most importantly, the connections to those signature authorities that are required for the collaboration agreement to complete your submission package. Basically a wrap up of what I just said. So the background on our team, myself, a contracting guy, proposal writers, folks that have were instrumental in the establishment of AFWERX multiple years ago. So we have a thorough and deep understanding of this STRATFI program, and more specifically, how to build a compelling submission that can, again, survive the rigors of review and evaluation over to selection. For those that are new to STRATFI, what we're looking at from a SBIR funding perspective, again, solely the SBIR side of things, is a request anywhere between $3 million and $15 million over a potential 4-year period of performance. Keeping in mind that the point of the Strategic Funds Increase STRATFI program is to fully develop the relationships with the customer and end user base that you're going to grow into through phase 3 post STRATFI, and facilitate ultimately that transition in terms of finding budget, the requirement owners who have budget, and then building that acquisition strategy on your behalf so that we can hand that over to the government, specifically the contracting teams, to facilitate resolving the requirements that they have in terms of the solution being your IP and the developments you've made under that STRATFI program. All right, so looking at the bottom of this chart on the STRATFI side, so getting into STRATFI is a significant emotional event for a company. We're talking about dollars at scale, mass R&D, that we're pushing out over a potentially 4-year period. With that, there are matching requirements. So non-dilutive funding coming from the SBIR side at scale that isn't matched outside of the STRATFI program. And then on the left under defense only. So when we talk defense only and dual use in terms of the nomenclature here specific to AFWERX, defense only is only speaking to how the effort is funded. So going down the column there, defense only is government money at 2 times the rate of the SBIR funds. So if we max it out to 15, we're getting 15 on SBIR and 30 million match from a government entity or multiple, whether it's with intra-service or intra-agency companionships that will bring that matching funding. And then the significant emotional event and the dual use part of this is, again, going back to the funding nomenclature. So on dual use, we're looking at 2 parts private raise, whatever series or level or pace you're at the time leading into your submission. So 2 parts private, 1 part government, and then 1 part SBIR on the backside. So again, matching it out, we're looking at $60 million in match from private and 15 from government and 15 from SBIR. Can you, sorry, Q&A here from John Quinn. Can you apply to defense only, even if it is a, yeah, John. So again, these are terminology. This terminology is specific to AFWERX and specific to how the funding is. At its heart, we're still applying SBIR funds. So it has to be a dual use technology, right? You have to show your commercialization plan and also your defense need. So again, these are specific terms for the funding makeup, not necessarily whether it's dual use or defense only in terms of the technology itself. All right, eligibility. Number 1 key is that the company applying has to still be qualified under SBIR guidance as a small business. And there's some contention over whether under your NAICS code, you're actually considered a large business, but you have less than 500 employees. It's falling under the guidance from the SBA specific to the SBIR program. So that less than 500 employees still qualified as a small business. On an active SBIR phase 2 or a SBIR phase 2 that's been completed within 2 years of the capability package submission date. So let's say, for argument's sake, on the 15th, the notice of opportunity opens. The date that your phase 2 could have concluded is 2 years from the date you press, well, the government presses the button to submit the capability package for consideration under the STRATFI program. So it doesn't have anything to do with the notice of opportunity opening or closing. It's actually the actual date from when the government POC hits the submit button. That phase 2 can be from outside of the Air Force or Space Force. That's not broadcast. STRATFI isn't a whole of government or DoD writ large phase 2 enhancement program. That being said, if you do have an eligible phase 2 that meets those milestone dates and it's outside, it's with another federal agency or with another DoD sister service, it can still meet that eligibility requirement for you. The subject effort has not already been awarded a sequential phase 2. So what that specifically means is, by the SBIR's current legislation for their oversight of the SBIR program, a phase 2 can only receive 1 sequential award in its lifetime. So 1 brand new contract on the back end for an enhancement to the phase 2. So if through another program, let's say there was a sequential phase 2 applied, that specific, not the company, but that specific phase 2 is now no longer eligible for the STRATFI or conversely the TACFI program moving forward. So you have to have that eligibility against your phase 2 in order to have eligibility into the STRATFI program. And then at least 90 days have passed since the beginning of your phase 2. So I know some companies, they just got on contract within the last probably 6 weeks. Looking at what we think is going to be the timeline for the STRATFI Notice of Opportunity ending at the end of August, most of those brand new phase twos will not meet eligibility for that 90 days. That being said, there was, and I don't know if it still exists, but there is a possibility that if you have a strong relationship with your phase two partner and that entity, customer and end user base is super interested in pushing forward immediately, there is a waiver process that can be actioned on behalf of that 90-day requirement. We can talk about that if we want to start going down that road. But that really considers that you have a strong appetite with budget on the government side ready to go right now, and they're really interested in pursuing that waiver. Yeah, not executing a prior STRATFI effort at the time of submission. Now, there's some proposed legislation that's on the Hill that hasn't made it into the Reauthorization Act yet, some of it in the Innovation Act or Innovate Act, that might eliminate this in the future. But as it stands right now, the program rules limit a single company from receiving more than one STRATFI in its lifetime. Theory being, once you get to STRATFI, you are graduating now as a company out of the SBIR program and should be off and running on a phase three. So that's corporately. And then again, going back to the left side of the column, any sequential that's been applied to your phase two now makes that ineligible. Work performed within the United States, that's based out of the SBIR Policy Directive. Yeah, matching requirements, we can get into more of the nuance and detail of this later, but at a minimum for STRATFI, it is required that at the time of contract award, so if we lay this out as a calendar continuum, we have the notice of opportunity opening next week, submission close is the end of August. These are anecdotal dates right now. Go through the entire review process, potentially with the notification of selection in the January timeframe. And then we're looking at 120 days to contract award. So that May-ish timeframe, based on when the SBIR budget lands with AFRL and AFWERX. All that to say, promissory notes are good for your capability package submission initially, but at contract award date, the company has to show that they have the receipt of funds for at least the first 2 years in their bank account if you're on the dual use side of the matching funds calculation. Similarly, on the defense only side, from the government matching piece, it has to be the first 2 years in-house that can go on in the contract. All that is required because SBIR funds can never go first, and we will only match, SBIR will only be matched up to what is available in terms of matching funds. So at least the first, from a private investment piece, it's mandatory that the first 2 years be in the bank account. Yeah, and then the collaboration agreement signatures we'll talk about here in just a minute. Let me check our Q&A. So from anonymous, for dual use, if my team can get 7 million from private funding, does my customer have to come up with 3.5 and SBIR program matches 3.5? Yeah, so the match, and then, or can my government customer provide 1 million and SBIR provide 6? So no, the ratio of funds that are being requested from SBIR will never exceed what the government is putting in and the 2+ parts of what private is putting in. So if you're only going to ask for 1 million or raise 1 million on the government side, then that's all you'll be able to ask for on the SBIR side. All right, so timeline again, anecdotal. This is what we're hearing and thinking is going to be the timeline. So by summer, we mean now, July. Hopefully, we'll see it next week with a close at the end of August. So a very quick turn and timeline in terms of getting the signatures and everything built in terms of the collaboration agreement, milestone spend plan, etc. All right, and application requirements. Again, this is subject to change until we see the actual notice of opportunity, see if there's been any documentation changes for this specific notice period. But basic information from the company, specifically the information on your phase two and the clear identification of its eligibility for submission to the STRATFI program. And where we are going to make our wins is in the proposed STRATFI effort, hammering hard on the summary of the research and development specifically. T&E, test and eval, it is included in SBIR expenditures. Goodness, excuse me. But we see the most success in rigorous R&D. We can do T&E in year 3 and 4, but that R&D is really what we want to describe and fully develop to make an easy use and win case for the selection team as they propose this back up to senior leadership for selection. End user and customer, this goes beyond just the capability package, and this is more for your business solvency and annual revenue and return. When we get to post STRATFI, it's interesting who we get to sign, and it's a requirement to make sure we get the grades, ranks, and levels appropriate for the signature. But what we really want to see is those folks that, no kidding, have budget that we can see from the NDA that's proposed for future fiscal years, that's going to be the catalyst to move you to phase 3, right? So STRATFI is interesting, a lot of money, great program, but what we really want to lay during these 4 years is that foundation for phase 3, master IDIQs, transitional program of record, whatever the case may be. So the customers and the end user for signature are interesting, but what we really want is that catalyst for post STRATFI transition. Milestone spend plan and your non-proprietary work plan are required. It's going to basically give you the foundation. Well, you're offering to the government POC the foundation for what's going to be turned into the RFP, request for proposal, post-selection, which you will respond to with pricing at that time. So that's incredibly important because you want to tell the government what you want to deliver in terms of research and development, and that can be put directly into the RFP as opposed to the government trying to figure it out post-election, and maybe something comes back to you that you weren't anticipating that might change your dollar perspectives, costing, and structure, and different things like that. 2 really important points. So the finance MOU and the contracting MOU, these are required documents as of right now. Again, we need to see the notice of opportunity documentation and if there's been any changes. That being said, both of these have to be signed along with the collaboration agreement upon submission, or the entire submission is not eligible because it didn't meet requirements. So from finance, their responsibilities are going to be managing any of the government matching dollars to ensure that those go through the proper channels or budgeted for, and then make it to contracting for execution. And then for contracting, as opposed to any open topic that you may have submitted to before through AFWERX, where AFWERX actually does the contracting and maintains that through the contract life. For STRATFI and TACFI, contracting is done external to AFWERX with either the customer, end user, organization finding that contracting capacity and having them sign this memo. That is incredibly important, especially right now. We're in a time crunch. The good thing for contracting is we're not looking for an award until Q3 of next year. So that should gives them some runway. But getting this signed requires some pretty intimate conversations from the government POC who's supporting your submission. And getting them on board early. I've seen a lot of submissions get kicked because they can't get this document signed. They get the signature on the collaboration agreement, but they can't pull contracting along. So that's a conversation that, along with your end user and customer signature conversations, that contracting has to start as soon as possible as well. Let me check our Q&A real quick. Yeah, Edmund, so with an 85% success hit rate, what assurances and guarantees do Outpost make to clients? No assurances and guarantees. We do have basic client agreements and things like that. I can get you in touch with our CEO, Lynn, if you'd like to discuss that more. But it's like everything else, especially with the way SBIR phase 1 and phase 2 through AFWERX at least has gone, and those have gotten incredibly competitive. I can tell you that the advantage we bring is, templates that we've built that have shown success through the evaluation process, our team with the knowledge and background, but in terms of assurances and guarantees, I don't think we have anything right now. Is STRATFI and TACFI on the same timeline? Are they only one release per year? Oh, Philip, you didn't miss it. So STRATFI, as it stands right now as a program, is once a year. It's traditionally in the summer release and a fall close. And then the evaluations take us into the January timeframe for selection and notification. For TACFI, what we did different this year is we had two openings, one right at the beginning of the year, another one in March. Those selection notifications on the Air Force side should be coming out for the second cohort of TACFI. I think the push and the desire of AFWERX leadership and AFRO leadership moving forward is to have TACFI open on a rolling basis. And they essentially cut it off at the end of each month, do their evaluations, and then make their notifications until they expend all of the prior year's budget. So looking back 2 years, because R&D funds are good for 2 years, SBIR funds. But no, to answer your specific question, STRATFI and TACFI are not on the same timelines. And the guidance on TACFI, we haven't seen what the next cycle is going to look like just yet. Edmund, I will have to take that question for action and work with Carrie, our great moderator and host today, and we can get back to you. Yes, Anonymous, the recording will go out on our YouTube page once we're done. And then Andrew, do the collaboration agreement and contracting MOU have to be Air Force? So for the collaboration agreement, the customer must be from Department of the Air Force. So that includes Space Force. End user can be anybody in the federal government, but the customer has to be Department of the Air Force. And then contracting, same thing. Contracting can be pulled through by either the customer or the end user. So I have seen, and we have executed on submissions that were selected that the customer was Department of the Air Force, end user was Army, and then we sent our money to an Army contracting execution office. So it can be done. It's a bit more tricky just in terms of moving the money and trying to get that education over to the contracting office outside of the Department of Air Force, but not impossible. And if that's an avenue that a contracting office is willing to sign, absolutely take it. All right, so the nuts and bolts of our conversation today, and the thing that is most impactful, a lot of what we can support through the Outpost on our end is avoiding common mistakes that are easy discriminators and differentiators for the evaluation team and the initial ingest team on the AFWERX side to remove packages from consideration. First and foremost, missing elements. So notice of opportunity is not a solicitation, but there are required documents that are listed in the notice of opportunity. Those that are missing generate an automatic kickback. And if it's not resolved before the closing date, it will not be accepted moving forward. And that's really important because even if the collaboration agreement is done, all the appropriate level and authority of signature is complete, but there's other missing elements. It doesn't, and I've seen this, doesn't matter how highly ranked or influential the person that's signing as potentially the customer is, we still have to follow the rules of the notice of opportunity and things will get kicked. So keep that in mind. That documentation completeness is mandatory. Any missing signatures, similarly, it goes to completeness of the package. Any missing signatures will void out that submission and it will not be considered post the closing date for the notice of opportunity. Matching funds is another one that we see big time. So phase threes, if anybody has executed and awarded phase threes, even potentially on IDIQ, as long as the funds were applied within 6 months of your capability package submission date, those can be applied as government matching funds. But again, they have to meet those requirements and be within 6 months. And then ineligible third party, there's a lot of Q&A on the AFWERX website under STRATFI TACFI as it relates to private matching funds. Pre-sales don't count. There's other things that don't count, promissory notes, different things like that. So bear in mind that we have to pay particular close to the instructions on the third party matching to make sure that what is being offered as that private matching dollars does in fact actually meet the intent and the rules that are listed there. And I'll skip down to number 5. Number 4, that really boils down to what you lay out in one document needs to align and match and add up in another. So your milestones and your funding, if we're going to divide it out into government and private, or government and SBIR funds, make sure that those columns add up and the total at the bottom doesn't exceed any thresholds or drop below the $3 million threshold. One thing on that too to consider, so there's 2 ways kind of to execute from a contracting perspective and the tracking of funds when we do the dual use side. So having private matching funds as a part of this. One is for the government to track how those funds are expended, not cost sharing. So the private entity, the company, isn't sending any money to the treasury, which eventually makes its way down to the executing contracting officer. But we can see 3 columns on their RFP where they want to see, the SBIR funds, the government matching funds, and private matching funds. That is one way. The preponderance of what I see is that government confirms that the private matching funds have been received, and then they don't track it beyond that until the next request for SBIR funds comes in, and they want to ensure that the matching funds are in place. So no one is going to, from the government side, is going to be tracking those private dollars. And that's important because there's not a requirement via the program for the company to employ those private match funds against this specific effort or the research and development. So the theory is you come into this program, you do the raise. The raise allows you to hire, build infrastructure, whatever the case may be, and not necessarily employ those dollars here. So inaccurate phase 2 contract. Again, the eligibility requirement for that within the last 2 years prior to submission date with 90 days of performance and no sequential contract award against that phase 2 previously. Document integrity. This one really goes back to using previous versions. So ensure that we're on the current notice of opportunity, current documentation, and nothing is manipulated in there. The team's really big on that, especially on the quad chart. They don't want any updates, any flashy graphics, any additions. Stick to what's offered and answer the mail there. We talked about financing contracting acceptance. That contracting acceptance is key. Without that signed and appropriately acknowledged by the contracting officer or the chief of the contracting office, then it can't go, the submission can't go in because there's no contracting execution capacity attached to it. Contract award responsibility goes back to that contracting office and acceptance memo. And again, using the previous additions and forms. Let me look at the Q&A. I think we had one. Does the timeline, Mohammed, does the timeline for the STRATFI have to be 4 years? Can it be shorter? If so, what is the? Yeah, it can be shorter. If you can expend the full amount of money that you're requesting and do the appropriate raise and find the matching funds from the government, whether you're dual use or defense only, then you can absolutely shorten that time frame. That is totally up to you and what capacity you have for the research and development, ultimately to expend the funds that you raise. Did you say the timeline for funding is Q3 of 26? No, it's the beginning of fiscal year. So we're looking at Q2 of 26. Sorry, I was talking in fiscal there. So the timeline for contract awards post-selection is in that May-ish timeframe, May 26. Can private funds be from state sources? So Sasha, typically I see private funds or state resources come through as government matching, not on the private side. But I'm happy to get more information on your question. We can absolutely talk about that in greater detail. All right, so this slide, operational imperatives have gone away as a term du jour. But what I'll say is, and I left the chart up as a reminder to myself and to all of us that uh, strategic need of the Air Force or Space Force has to be clearly identified in terms of the relationship that your R&D and the development therein has to a strategic need either perceived or identified by a service uh, for the completeness of the package and the essentially building a requirement through this STRATFI process. So uh, we look everywhere for these, right? Trying to read the tea leaves. What's most important? I mean, you slap AI on anything right now, and it seems to get people's attention. So that's really the conversation to have with your government POC, customer, and end user to really identify at that MAGCOM, PEO, Center, Department of the Air Force, Department of the Space Force level what that imperative needs, strategic imperative need is, and how specifically the completion of this research and development you're proposing will build a solution that can be taken up effectively directly at the end of your STRATFI and operationalized to meet that strategic need. A list of PEOs, we have this included in the deck. You'll be able to access it. Centers and PEOs. These are listed because, and we'll have to wait and see the notice of opportunity when it comes out. There's a real possibility that the only signature allowed as a customer might be an Air Force PEO office, the lead there, 1-star or higher. That's a potential. I don't know that to be true at the moment, but that's something to consider. Equivalencies for those in other agency or institutions are at the centers. And then we have the space PEOs as well. MAGCOMs can be a signature authority from a customer perspective as well. They have a strategic need within the MAGCOM that something like this meets. The question is, from a MAGCOM perspective, where does it go post? Because they don't really have the capability capacity to run things as a program of record. So the tie back to a PEO or a AFL-CMC is also important. Ultimately, how we advise and dictate where we go to make these introductions is really following that organizational chart and command structure back from your phase 2 partnerships. Of course, we can, based on the IP or the technology and the applicability across the force, we can go in multiple directions. But ultimately, we want to go with that care and feeding of the relationship you already have in place through your phase 2 and work up as appropriate, and then across once we hit the appropriate threshold for those that are holding money, decision makers, requirement development owners, your A5 staff, and things like that at the MAGCOMs, and then back over to the PEOs. So that we're not initially shooting in the dark. And that's especially important for this STRATFI cycle since we're so close to the notice of opportunity. We got to build on those relationships that we already have in place through that phase 2. Yeah, so strategies to win. Really, what it boils down to, me having seen these for several years at this point, is the description of the technology, the tie of that technology directly to an identified and agreed upon strategic need that the Department of the Air Force, which it may not go up there for evaluation moving forward. We'll have to wait and see what that process looks like and what's publicized by AFWERX. But a strategic need. It's not a pet project for a command or a center, but it meets that strategic need at Air Force level. So your research and development to meet that strategic need and the funding and transition pathway in the out years. Now, all that is pre NDAA, obviously, in out years. But what we want to see and what we want to write in our transition strategy is, if any of you have worked through the collaboration agreement before and you've seen the templates in there, it says under transition strategy, if successful, explain what the transition looks like. What I have witnessed is they most leave in that if successful part and then just write from a company's perspective, more than likely the company wrote it. If successful, we want to pursue a phase three, very opaque in its description of exactly what the plan for this and post STRATFI phase three strategy, funding, and operational case is. What we want to build, and frankly, from a company perspective, what you want to put the government on the spot to do is answer the mail in that section. When it's successful, our plan is to transition to a phase three in FYX 28, 29. We're looking for money through congressional inserts, or it's on the UFR list, or it's in the PEM budget for FY, pick your year. We want to see a plan that is actionable without having to be fully developed at a later date. We want to tell that story to decision makers in the AFWERX program, reviewing these STRATFIs, that no kidding, A, this is a strategic need, B, we trust that the R&D is going to be developed that meets that, and C, we have no kidding a plan to transition. This organization, two-letter PEO office is going to catch this on the back end, and here's the funding that we are requesting in FY26 to support post STRATFI execution and phase three contract awards in 29, 30, whatever the case may be. So the real keys: signature authorities, all signatures to include the financing contracting signatures are done, the appropriate signature levels and authorities, and then telling that compelling research and development case for a strategic need, and then ironing out specifics on a transition plan. I realize that all that's subject to change, specifically on the transition plan piece, but it's in your best interest from a company perspective to see that on a page so that you can go back to your investors and talk about that and say what is potentially real in the plan from a government perspective in terms of post STRATFI execution. Let me see, question. Can you elaborate more on the difference between finance coordination and contracting coordination? Yeah, so if we go back, let me click on this chart. Yeah, so if we look at the makeup of our funding mix on the defense only side, presumably if we're asking for 15 million in government matching, that's not all going to be applied on a phase three, meaning it's already on contract somewhere and it's just being tracked as matching. There's going to be real money, now money, current year funds are going to have to be applied to the contract as well with the SBIR funds. That finance person who's signing is saying, not only is the money in the budget and it's real and it's there, we have it to offer, put on a purchase request form or MIPR and get that to the contracting officer for execution. Similarly on the dual use side, but I see a lot of times on the dual use side, a bunch of phase threes going in as matching. So finance has a lesser role in all that. From a contracting officer memo perspective, when you see it, it says, I, contracting officer X, agree to execute this contract post-selection within 120 days. And they have to build the RFP, get that over to the company. The company has to propose, negotiate that, and get it on contract. So it's essentially a memo that we incorporated into the package to ensure that those functionals are talked to early enough to understand that this workload might be coming, as opposed to what we saw back in 2020, where we just made selections, sent out notifications to the identified contracting and finance person. And they were like, what are you talking about? And we don't have capacity right now. Or we're trying to avoid those kinds of things. So it's a memo to allow those two functions, finance and contracting, to acknowledge the workload and say that they will be able to do it and execute it when the selections come out. All right, from Philip, the signatory official must be an Air Force PEO 1-star or above. No, it's 06 or above, but it's in those organizations to make sure that we're tied back to those actual organizations. Again, that's subject to change. I haven't seen a notice of opportunity that's coming out. There might be some differing guidance specifically on the mandatory alignment to PEOs, and that may adjust that signature authority. But as it stands right now, it's at the 06 level. So Mohammed, in the past, which signatures have been the hardest to acquire? Traditionally, it's the customer, because the customer is the one that's essentially saying that by signing, they're beyond interested in the technology and meeting a strategic need, but that they have dollars at scale that they're willing to commit in the future. End users, it's kind of like your phase twos, right? You can find a lot of potentially a lot of very interested people, but they don't have skin in the game. They're just signing because they're not actually putting up funds or anything like that. So end users, we can typically find those that are ready to rock and roll and support because they're interested and they want to see your tech flourish and be used operationally. But that customer is tougher to come by. All right, we kind of hit on this, but just to go through the review process. So initial review, that's significant in that's a team of folks. They're not doing, we don't do evaluations on notice of submissions because it's a notice of opportunity, but the initial review is the opportunity for the government to take a look at what you've submitted. And if there are any missing things or bad templates or anything like that, they can give you feedback. And assuming you got it in early enough and it's before the end of the notice of opportunity to close, they'll give you some feedback and let you make appropriate adjustments with time allows. So getting the submission in as early as possible, even if it's not fully baked, allows you the time to get some cursory feedback from the AFWERX team and the government. Functional review and strategic review. This is when we hand over to subject matter experts in the field that you have identified that you're going to apply your research development and have them do 3 independent reviews of that tech. And they're running the gamut on what they review. Does it read feasible? Is it really something that the Air Force is interested in? Are you asking for what is perceived as not enough money potentially to get through that entire research and development over the time frame that you proposed? And then it gets moved up to some of the entities with the realignment have gone away, but those organizations that are focused on future efforts and building requirements as we move forward, they review it again for that strategic need, tie, and attachment, and what they perceive to be the true needs of the Air Force as we sit under the current administration and leadership, where we project that we will be in 4 years, and does that actually fit into those categories? After that, we go to the board. There's a preliminary review and assessment that is offered to senior leadership. Again, it's not a source selection, so there's not a comparative evaluation against all submissions. They're each one individually reviewed on its own merits, and scored isn't the right word, but effectively they get a merit-based evaluation individually, and then a proposal is offered to the board for review in terms of selection status. After we've made our selections, go over to the SBA, request for waivers so we can exceed the dollar thresholds as are currently prescribed. This is significant on the STRATFI side, less so on the TACFI side. And then we're looking now at the January timeframe based on what we think the schedule is going to be right now, and those selection notifications will go out. Post-selection notification, again, that starts an official contracting process. So the notice of opportunity process is something that was developed specifically by AFWERX to get after this program. Once we make selection, from that date plus 120 is when all the actual contracting processes take off. So you've got the contracting officer working with the requirement owner to generate the request for proposal. Presumably within at least 30 days, that'll come over to the company. You have 30 days to generate your proposal back to the government, 30 more days for negotiations, any go backs, and then we get on contract within 120 days. So it seems a bit redundant, and we're looking for expedited ways to make the documentation more aligned with that contracting process, so you're not having to do it twice. But what I'll tell you is everything that you work with your government POC to build right now fully informs that proposal or RFP that's built by the contracting officer post-selection. Let's see. Can the end user and the customer be the same office, Joshua? Yeah, they can. My recommendation would be not to be the same person, but if it is they could potentially be the same office. Um, benefit to you avoiding that situation is a broader audience, more at bats, since a capacity to maybe get funds in different ways. But yeah, it can be the same office. Philip, how quickly do the matching funds from a government organization need to be allocated if the STRATFI contract is awarded? So again, Philip, from on the day of the contract is going to be awarded, whatever the matching ratio that you are proposing, either defense only or dual use, that has to be intact. So let's say for year one, the request for SBIR is $5 million, and the government match either has to be 10 or 5, depending on which track you go at the time that the SBIR funds are applied. So in terms of timing, anytime SBIR funds are applied to that contract, the ratio match has to be in place. So if they're not matching with government phase 3 dollars and it's real current year funds, they have to be on right then when the SBIR funds are applied. Eleanor, when will TACFI open again? I am not sure. I don't know if they are going to do a fall cycle on TACFI right now. As far as I understand, they're fully focused on getting the selection notifications out for the last TACFI cycle. Most recent thing we heard was maybe mid-July or towards the end of July for those notifications. And then they're going full focus onto STRATFI. My guess based on last year is that it will come out in the January, February timeframe again. Kimberly, are you recommending submitting an incomplete package for review? Is there a way to identify the company's package is incomplete or just being submitted for review? Not incomplete. What I have seen is all signatures complete. It gets submitted. Initial review team is checking it out, and they see that your funding commitment letter from the government POC has some potentially wrong information from the phase 3 that they're discussing as being matching funds, or so a completed package to the absolute best of the government's ability to complete that package as early as possible in terms of getting feedback on any of the package specific details that might be missing, outdated templates, anything like that, that they could, the government POC could go ahead and update. Not incomplete, because the initial review will just kick it back and say, not complete, go complete it. But I have seen some, best efforts be put in, and then the initial review team catches a thing or two, and they had the time to go back and actually make those updates. All right. Anonymous, can you share your perspective on timeline for selection notifications for TACFI cycle? Yeah, so Anonymous, that was last I heard is sometime between middle of July and end of July, but I haven't heard any updates in the last couple of weeks. That's another question from Anonymous. Is a TACFI considered a sequential phase 2? My understanding from AFWERX is that the expected transition is a phase 2 to TACFI to STRATFI. So that is not the expectation from AFWERX to build like that. That is a possibility, but not the expectation. So a TACFI, again, what we talked about in terms of the contracting process for STRATFI, it also applies to TACFI. So there's two ways to award a sequential TACFI, or there's two ways to award a TACFI or a STRATFI. There's a sequential phase 2, brand new contract that is foundationally based on the phase 2, but it in and of itself has its own contract number. It completely independent of the phase two. That is a sequential. The alternative is a phase 2B modification to the existing phase two, which is the phase two exists, keeps its contract number. The contracting officer does a modification to add the TACFI work, scope of work, and funds, and that allows that TACFI to be executed, and it allows the phase two to be eligible for STRATFI application. So, in terms of your question, is a TACFI considered a sequential? Yes, if the TACFI is awarded as a brand new contract and not a modification to the phase two. If it is awarded as a sequential, then that specific phase two is now no longer eligible for STRATFI consideration. Approximately what percentage of proposal packages that don't get dinged for administrative reasons, such as using the wrong template, get funding? There's not a correlation between administrative dings and selection. Once it gets to initial review, essentially everything's equal. That means that all the submissions have met all the requirements for the documentation piece. No one tracks on the back end of who had go backs or anything like that. And then, again, once it gets into the functional and strategic review, each package is completely independent, and the review team doesn't tell the leadership within STRATFI, program to pass on to the functional reviewers, hey, this package had to go back and forth any number of times. So it's not a part of the calculus. You probably just said this, Sasha, but what's the look back period for government matching funds, i.e. from other agencies? So, Sasha, I'm going to interpret that to mean from phase threes. So if you have, potentially a phase three contract with the Army, let's say, the look back period for matching government funds from previous contract work, specifically phase threes, is 6 months prior to your official submission date to the STRATFI program. And if I'm misinterpreting your question, Sasha, please feel free to add more detail in the Q&A. How do we start with the package for STRATFI? So when the notice of opportunity comes out, all the documentation will be posted on the STRATFI TACFI website. You can start then. You can also go back. There's previous documentation. Again, just making sure you don't use old templates when you do the official submission. But you can see what is needed, necessary, and required as far as that documentation is concerned from the previous cycle. But again, once that notice drops, the documentation will be out there. The kicker is, say, how do we start? So the key to starting is getting that government champion POC, presumably within the customer end user signature chain of command, who is actually going to take the completed submission and put it into the Ingest portal. It has to go in from a government POC. So that's really the start of the package, is who is going to be that government POC that's, no kidding, going to go in and put everything into the system. But in terms of starting with the package, you can go off the previous year's documentation, get an example of that, or I'm happy to, my email's at the end, happy to get your contact info, and we can link up and talk about some of the documentation. Kimberly, when does private sector money have to be received by, and is it a lump sum or tranche? So I don't have a good chart for that. So looking at our review process here, Kimberly, as we get over to 6, so award, on award, let's say May 22nd of next year, on award day, at minimum, the first 2 years of private matching funds has to be in your bank account. So part of the RFP process, request for proposal process, and your proposal response will be a no-kidding screenshot of certified bank statement that shows that the funds have landed in your bank account. And there's, per the rules, there's guidelines on when it could be received, how early, looking back, its association to your specific application at STRATFI and others. But to answer your question, that first 2 years has to be in your bank account in terms of at the date the contract is being signed. Now, to the second part of your contract or your question, uh, can it be a tranche or lump sum? So let's say we're doing 10 million in SBIR, 10 million in match from government sources. So we're looking at 40 million in raise or 20 million in raise. So you could do it all lump sum up front and then you're done for the entirety of the contract. That's totally fine. Or you can do the first 2 years on award, show that in your um, bank account. And then the next time that SBIR is requested, would be the following year from the contracting officer. You're good, right? You've already got your money. You've shown that in the bank account. Then in year 3, you would need that next tranche to match the requirement at that time for your funding ratios. Yeah. So Philip, do you have any shareable information on the win rates for TACFI and STRATFI? Only among proposers that provided full, complete, and correct submissions. So for TACFI, I think in the first tranche, there it was like a 65-70% win rate or selection rate rather. And then based on budget, this one that's going to be released soon, I think is down to 15%. And that's not, a ding on any of the submissions, a ton of quality packages, just running out of money with the current year funds that we have for research or SBIR and SITR. And then for the previous STRATFI cycle, here are the details. So again, each package is evaluated independently. The proposal for it to move forward for selection is based solely on the rigorous R&D, the application to a strategic need, and the transition plan. Ultimately, leadership makes a decision on how much they want to spend per tranche based on other activities they have going, must pays in the future, and things like that. So these numbers will fluctuate. If numbers go up based on what we're seeing in the bill, more money might come in, and then there'll be more selectees in that specific tranche. But since it's not, again, a source selection, these numbers will jump and ebb and flow. And one thing to consider too is, let's say these 40 packages that we got this last time, all of them were great. We wanted to fund them all. Then we would have no STRATFI submission window for probably 2 years. So there's that calculus too of how much can we actually afford to maintain a program moving forward and pay our must pays out in the future. Philip, also for STRATFI, is there a preference? Sorry, it just moved. Also for STRATFI, is there a preference, higher win probability for the defense only versus dual use submissions? No. Again, the evaluation is specifically that defense need research that you're proposing to advance the state of the art and your transition plan. Bottom line is that is not a piece of the calculus. I would tell you, just generally, defense need is tougher, right? Because that's more money at scale that the organization may or may not have available. And then ultimately, from the program as it's built and with agreement from the SBA, what we're really trying to drive is that private investment for the expansion of the industrial base, not just a focus on a capability being delivered to the federal government. Anecdotally, nowhere in the SBIR policy directive does it say transition. It talks about commercialization. So I would say from a program focus, that the preference from an SBA side of things is that the private investment be in there. But from an evaluation perspective, internal to AFWERX, it's not part of the calculus. Our customer had to download the phase 2 documents. Will that be the same for the STRATFI? Yeah, it'll be a part of, yeah, all the phase 2 information, the contract document. I mean, I don't know if the notice of opportunity will require them to download it and submit it as part of the capability package, but they'll at a minimum need to know, contract number, award dates, and all that kind of stuff. What evidence do you need uh, supply of private capital commitment at the initial submission date? Yeah, that Sasha, that'll be included in the documentation posted with the notice of opportunity. It's a memo that says, you know, Venture Holdings XYZ is going to commit $5 million at this date based on STRATFI selection. Uh, but yeah, it's a document that will be hosted out there for you. Did you say 15% success rate for the second cohort of TACFI? Uh, yeah, I don't know this to be true. I wasn't involved in that specific cohort, but as I understand it, they got a pretty large number of submissions, and they have a pretty small budget left over at the moment in order to accommodate some selections and contract awards based on that cohort. So I do think what we will see is a significantly lower selection rate solely based on the budget that was available at the time. Yeah, so our tagline, "Get off the stage," pitch to you here is what we can offer. Now, when I say we've got talent at every process requirement and level for specifically STRATFI, but well beyond that, phase 1, phase 2, direct to phase 2, challenges, phase 3. I've had a bunch of work in that. I mean, we are here to support and serve and get anybody that is interested in working with us in the best possible position for selection, whether it's STRATFI this year or we lay the groundwork right now, starting today for submission next year, start building those relationships, signatures, finding the dollars and everything else. But we are absolutely here to set you guys up for success. Let's see, we had another question. How can Outpost help build customer relationships, POCs, with the PEOs? Andrew, that's a great question. So what I'll tell you is, with all of the wins that we have had over the last several years through all the different SBIR phases, we made a bunch of core relationships based on getting those submissions together. We also have a rockstar advisory board that are there to assist senior leaders, heavy hitters, powerhouse folks that have direct relationships with those offices. Our founder does as well, based on his previous work, as well as Joey, our president. We're just loaded with quality folks with great reputations and connections, and we build those relationships on a daily basis as part of our BD plan for each company. And then Kimberly, what is the price structure? I'm not sure if you're talking about advisory services or STRATFI. So if you want to add some specificity there, I'm happy to try to answer that for you. Because we are at time, well, post time, 103, 104 Central, my time. I am happy to stay on as long as you guys want. Please feel free to snap a photo there. My phone number, email address. Joey is a mentor of mine and someone that steers our organization every day and is a wealth of knowledge and experience as well. We are absolutely here to take questions, find feedback. Please tag us all on LinkedIn. Look me up. Looking forward to expanding the network and getting to have a contact and touch point with all of you at some point in the future. Carrie, if we want to go 30 more seconds, see if Kimberly updates her question. And if not, till next time, can't wait to hear from everybody. let's see. All right, Kimberly. So STRATFI price structure. So uh, if you've ever submitted a proposal, it's going to look the exact same ultimately when we get through it. But on the STRATFI documentation side, you've got your non-proprietary work plan, a Word document that talks about everything that is going to be done in terms of research and development. And then you'll essentially have that on a spreadsheet with a column for SBIR funds, a column for government matching funds, and potentially, depending on how the RFP is written, a column for private matching funds. And you'll lay out over the full life of the contract, let's say up to the 4 years, how you're going to expend over that time the SBIR and the government matching dollars. Ben Matthews, thank you, sir. For SBIR, John, for SBIR 25.4 BA release 10, what is the maximum amount? I know there was some question that we were looking. I think what was publicized and what was written in the documentations was off. I don't want to quote the wrong thing back to you, but John, feel free to email me and I can get you that answer. No problem. All right, Kara, I exceeded our 30 seconds. I think we're good to go. Thanks again, everybody. Awesome conversation talk. Look forward to having this discussion again soon. Thanks.